I don't know. You got something catchy to say to start it off?
No, I don't. Hello,
All right.
everyone. Welcome back.
It's been a while.
It's been a good 6 months. Has it been? When did we do this last? September?
Yeah, 6 months ago.
Cool.
More than that. Well, we'll just jump into it then.
Uh,
Today's Mitch and Dustin podcast. We're going to be doing an album review. We've done some album reviews for the Killers albums in the past, and we're going to do one today for an album called Hypocrisy and Akrasia that was released back in January of 2022, and it's by Dustin.
yeah, it's my album. Um, yeah, cool. So how do you want to do it?
So I just wanted to jump right in and start talking about it.
Okay, let's
What
talk
do you
about it.
have? What do you have to say about the production experience of this album? What was it like writing it? What was it like recording it and producing it? Do you have any just generals off the top of your head that you'd like to talk about?
Well, first, I thought it's clearly like way better in quality than like the first album I put out, Man Without a Home. And so it's kind of been fun the past couple of years, like looking up how to like the different, I don't know, techniques of audio engineering and stuff like that. And so it's been fun like developing those skills and making my songs sound closer to how I hear them in my head. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. This album is leaps and bounds better than anything that we have ever produced. Um, in fact, what's kind of always been a frustration when we were playing in a band together, and even as we've released individual solo stuff, is that, uh, in my opinion, we're better than average songwriters,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just never come through because our performance style wasn't great when we were performing live. We didn't
What do
practice
you
super hard.
mean?
We weren't super polished.
We weren't
Um,
polished, but our performance style was awesome. We were
sure,
showmen. Everyone loved us.
maybe I just meant we weren't super polished,
Yeah.
and our production quality when we record music has just been awful. In fact, so
Yes.
this album is really good. In fact, and maybe I don't want to speak for you, but for myself, I mean, it's about as good as you could expect to do as an amateur recording artist. But what
I
was
mean,
the
you say
key?
you say that as an amateur recording artist. Right?
Yes,
Like,
right, right. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if anything I produced sounded as good in quality as what you just produced, I would be 100% satisfied with it. But what was the key to getting it to sound better than what you've done in the past?
I watched a lot of different YouTube videos for different like techniques, like I said, like researching all that. I guess, are you asking like specifically what are some of the tricks I used?
Yeah,
I use a lot of um, well, I figured out how to use compression for one thing. Like I understand what it is and how to use it. I think I like looking back on it, like even since January, I've learned a little more, and I feel like I used too much compression on this album on my vocals, but I mean it is what it is. Um, so I figured out how to use compression. I use um, a parametric EQ, and so I um, it for me it's easier to see the sound waves as I do EQ. And a lot of people, I guess, from what I've learned, will tell you not to like EQ by looking at the sound waves. But like for me, like not knowing anything like how to about EQ, and I know we've talked about this, like we just don't know what sounds good. Visualizing it really helped me understand what was going on. And so after I was able to like know what it looked like, I was able to then hear the difference. like when I see the graph go up at this frequency, then I know what that frequency sounds like. And so like I was able to learn the different frequencies by doing that, I guess is what I'm saying. And so I learned a little more about EQ and all that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think those are the two big things. I was always hesitant, I guess, before this album to pan instruments too far right or left. For whatever reason, I just thought it would sound better if they weren't panned as much, but then I just leaned into the panning and I found it sounds better. So there are those tricks as well.
Cool.
Oh,
What
and
about
also uh melodyne on my vocals. That
yeah.
helps. That's a huge aspect to the quality.
Shout out to Ceremony on that one.
Yeah, right.
We'll put our affiliate link in the description. What about on the input? Did you do anything different with the way you recorded the inputs in the first place before production? Or was that basically just you? I mean, you just did what you've always done.
So Man Without a Home, um, except for like maybe one or two guitar tracks, I used only virtual amps. So I was just plugging right into my audio interface with no pedal, no anything. Um, and then just selecting the effects on my DAW. And so for one, that took a lot of processing power. Um, and so it was sometimes a struggle to deal with that, just how much I was asking my computer to do. Um, but and I guess for that album it was fine because I didn't need too many crazy effects. Um, for this one, it was a lot harder for me to find a good. I have a couple songs where I wanted a cleaner tone, a crisper tone, and the virtual amp I have on my DAW is really better for more distortion. Doesn't really have a good clean setting, and so I had to figure out um, just different techniques to mic my amp, and so that's what I did differently on many tracks. I actually recorded my amp, and when I did that, I always use two microphones. So I have one microphone. I think you can kind of see there's a microphone just like right in front of my amp. But then I also turn this microphone on further back and get the room sound. And so I have two sources. I have the room like verb sound, and then also right by my amp. I don't know. I think it sounded decent.
Yeah, I thought it sounded good. I was gonna say one of the things that stood out to me from this album was the sophistication of the sound, and I think a lot of that is attributed to the guitar tones. So this album has a lot of riffs. Like if I was a 13-year-old learning how to play the guitar, I could go through this album and there are more than a handful of riffs that I would learn and feel good about learning that on the guitar. So it's interesting in the sophistication of the riffs, and then those tie in well because of the guitar tones that were used. It seemed like there was an appropriate amount of distortion and clean and that kind of thing. So that did stand out to me as I listened to the album as well.
Cool.
The other thing that stood out to me is I don't know what I would call it. It's lyrically brilliant. The consistency of the lyrics as well. I've always thought that the mark of a great songwriter is that they say what they mean to say, and there's not just like filler and fluff, right? One of the things that irks me the most about modern pop music is it's just all about nothing. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so this album, I was impressed track after track as I listened to it that every lyric said something for the most part.
I mean, I tried as I write songs, as I write lyrics in particular, I try to be meaningful. I've said, I think, as we have reviewed The Killers a couple times, like I don't typically like lyrics that are explicitly saying what the song is about.
Yeah.
And I feel like I did that on this album a few times which I'm not a huge fan of, but at the same time, it's like there is a certain mood that that kind of thing can help create. And so um, I sort of, I guess, bit the bullet on my personal preference in order
Yeah.
to
Well,
serve
and
the purpose of the song.
it sort of depends on the subject matter of the song too, right? Like if your song is about something meaningful, it's easier to say explicitly what it's about rather than when it's not really deep and you just are explicit about it. You know what I mean? These songs
Yeah,
are about
I don't know.
these songs are about heavy topics, so you can reference those heavy topics.
Yeah, but I don't know. I still like the symbolism and the poetry and all that pretentious stuff. So
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
Um, Speaking of which, where did the concept for this album come from?
So this concept actually came from, it was the second philosophy class I ever took, well, at BYU. Um, and we were talking about, it must have been Aristotle, because we were talking about the concept of akrasia, the idea of acting against your all things considered best judgment. Why do you consider one thing morally good and you don't do it, or why do you consider something morally bad and you still do it? It was an interesting topic to me, and one of the class discussions was about hypocrisy, because on the surface level, someone who is Socratic and someone who is hypocritical look similar. They're preaching one thing and yet doing another, right? And so our discussion in class was about, well, are they the same? Is there a difference between hypocrisy and akrasia, or are Socratic people just trying to find excuses for their behavior or something like that? So that's where the idea came from. It was all the way back in like 2014. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That like the only difference. Well, maybe you can speak to this more, but to me, it seems the only difference between hypocrisy and akrasia is intent.
Yeah.
Your internal intention, and nobody can know that except for you and God, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really what the album is. I wasn't explicit in saying that, but yeah, I think that's what I was going for.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the album flows perfectly through that. Like I think it starts with songs about hypocrisy, and then maybe you don't want to talk about what the explicit examples are, but it's interesting that it starts out with it. The album starts less personal and gets more personal as it goes on. So the first few songs are about the hypocrisy behind politicians. It starts with talking about the COVID-19 lockdowns and the way that politicians act online and in the media and what they preach versus what they do, and then talks about celebrities. It takes a shot at Jimmy Kimmel a little bit,
Yeah.
and then talks about the news media. And the original version of fake news had a segment in there where it goes through some of these sound bites of fake news reporting about the Covington kid and the stolen election and stuff like that, and all those things are involved in our daily lives, but they're pretty impersonal. They're distant from us. And then the next track is about the hypocrisy of religious people, and maybe that's something that is a little more personal as we interact with people in our communities and in our churches, and even reflect on ourselves. And then it gets more self-reflected with the next few tracks, and ends with Akrasia, which is like a ballad of introspection and relationship with God, which but so I think it just flows great both musically and lyrically from start to finish that way. What are your thoughts on how you feel about the finished product as a whole of the album?
Yeah, I like it. It's cool to, I mean, like I said, I had this first idea 8 years ago, and so it's cool to see it, come to fruition or whatever. And I I always, I don't know. I almost have mixed feelings because, like I said, I like the pretentiousness of, uh, the poetry and all of that. I like the sort of theme, the message, right? How the two concepts, hypocrisy and akrasia, bleed into one another, but yet are different things. Um, I don't know. I like how I was able to match the music with the lyrics and all of that. Um, I feel like I did a good job in that regard. There are still, as far as I guess quality goes, there are still a couple things on a few tracks that I listen to, and I'm like, I was just lazy. I could have fixed that. That's an easy fix. That was just laziness why that's in there. But
Yeah, music production's interesting that way. So, in product management in the tech industry, there's these theories of rapid prototyping and human-centered design and design-based thinking, which are all about the idea that you just get an idea and you put together the minimum viable product. As soon as you can put together an idea that you think might work, you get it into people's hands, and then you get their feedback and make an improvement, and then put it back out there again and see what they say about that, and then make improvements off of that feedback. And in the music industry, like, you can't do that. Once
right.
you publish it, you publish it, and there's no more feedback. You've got to get it right the first time.
And really, I mean, that's how it is in like all of art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like movies and TV shows and um, yeah, and literature. Like you either publish it the way you want it, or yeah, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
you can't just make edits. So I don't know. I'm sure there are a few exceptions, but
Yeah. When you were writing the album, did you sit down and intend for yourself to write an album from start to finish, or did you have songs put together and then it started to turn into a theme and then you filled it in with the pieces it needed?
um, so let me think. Um, so when I originally like conceived of this album, um, it was originally I was thinking of it as a Brunil album, because we were working on recording some songs um, before we decided to just record all of the songs that we played and make a sort of faux greatest hits, whatever. Um, uh, and so I was thinking, like, because the first song I wrote on this album was Fire, but Fire was going on the other album. And so the next song that I wrote was actually Rammy Umptum. And in Rammy Umptum is the idea there's a difference between hypocrisy and akrasia. Like I'm explicit there. And so I was thinking, well, we could have Rammy Umptum, we could have Change, the song you wrote. We could have a couple other songs. I can't remember exactly, but and so the idea of the album came before the specific songs. But like, I don't know, I guess songwriters go on phases of things that are on their mind or whatever. And so they write a lot about that in certain time periods. And so for whatever reason, during this time period, that's what was on my mind, I guess. So
yeah, great. I think it's awesome. Like cool. I have no bad things to say about this album.
I could point to some things that you could hear. Like I don't know if you would notice them, like without me pointing them out, but as soon as I point them out, you would like be annoyed by them. So I probably won't do that to me.
Okay. Yeah. It just is a very mature sound. You showed like discipline and self-restraint musically and lyrically throughout, which I think is great. There's no songs that were just frivolous. You didn't write another song halfway through the album that doesn't fit the theme and just throw it in there because you wanted to publish it, and that kind of thing. So I'm impressed
Well,
with that.
technically I did. Uh, so there are 11 tracks, but only 10 songs on the album. But until probably like April of last year, there were only 9. But I knew I wanted one more song to like sort of give the feel of Akrasia, or like be about Akrasia. And I was envisioning like a slower Killers-y ballad, just with a lot of emotion. But what came naturally was the Chosen One. Like I was just messing around one day with different chords, and then I was messing around playing the chords in the chorus of that song, and I was just singing random stuff as you do, and then I came to a point where I was like, something underestimate the high ground, and I was like, oh, and it clicked. Like this song could be about Star Wars, and this song can be about Akrasia at the same time. So technically I did. Like I needed one more song. I knew I wanted one more song. But yeah, I didn't, like, that song came, I guess, more naturally. But
yeah. I have been a big fan of The Chosen One since you showed it to me, so I got a sneak peek before the album came out. And I am a new Star Wars fan, so I have not been a fan of Star Wars until maybe a couple years ago. So I'm not as familiar with the lore and even just the movies. And so educate me here. But I was watching last month. I was watching back through Star Wars, the movies, from beginning to end, chronologically this time. And I didn't realize that the line in The Chosen One, "I'm afraid I lack the strength to do what I know I should," is that Kylo Ren that you're referencing there, or are you referencing Anakin?
So it's about Anakin, but Kylo Ren does say, he says that I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Yeah.
And so that sort of, that when I gave my, when I was at BYU and I was presenting a paper I wrote about Akrasia, that's the clip I showed at the beginning of my presentation. Right. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Kylo Ren saying that.
Do you think? Oh, sorry. Continue.
Well, no, I was just gonna say. So the song's about Anakin, but I did sort of like that line. I thought was good, and so I snuck it in there.
Yeah. And it seems Kylo Ren is not being sincere when he says that, so perhaps it's not the best fit.
Well, I don't know if he's not being sincere, but it's not the best fit because he does end up doing what he believes he should do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that case, he's not really Acratic, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of The Chosen One, what is your favorite song on the album, and which song is maybe your least favorite?
My favorite on the album, it's probably The Chosen One, just because I love Star Wars and I love rock and roll music, and this is a song that you get both in one, right?
Yeah.
It certainly was the funnest to make. I also really love Ramyumptum. That's one I was working on for over 5 years, and so I put a lot of work into that one. And the thing about Ramyumptum, which is funny, I originally heard it in my head as almost like an Imagine Dragons kind of sound. But then when I started recording it, it came out more of a Styx sound, which is the best upgrade anyone could ever ask for. So It was awesome. Anyway, so I like The Chosen One. I like Remiantum, and I really like Akrasia as well. I was a little bit disappointed because Akrasia, it's 9 minutes and 8 seconds long, and I really wanted it to be 10 minutes long, just
Yeah.
to say I had a 10-minute long song. But
I mean, Akrasia is meaningful and impulsive and self-indulgent and emotional and just everything you could want.
yeah, so yeah, those are my
And
three. My least favorite, you asked about. Uh, huh. Probably if I had to pick my least favorite, it would be More of Me. Although it turned out way better than I was anticipating. Um, yeah, so that song particularly, if you don't mind me talking about it a little bit, it started off as sort of like an 80s, like Every Rose Has Its Thorn kind of ballad. But it was kind of boring. And then I had the idea, because it has the same chord progression as uh, Bold as Love by Jimi Hendrix. And in particular, John Mayer does a cover of Bold as Love. And I was like, oh, I could sort of do it in that style, more bluesy. And so that's what I was planning on. But then while I was actually recording it, I had the idea to add an organ, and I added the organ, and then it came out more of like a Greta Van Fleet kind of sound, which I loved. They're probably my favorite new band right now. So, yeah, so that song sort of evolved the most from start to finish. It's probably the weakest song on the album, in my opinion, but I think for what it is, it's good, and I enjoy it.
is it a love song or is it symbolic of your relationship with Jesus?
It's actually a love song. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be symbolic about
Well,
that.
because here's the thing about Christian rock is you never know if they're
You never
talking
know.
about a girl or if they're talking about Jesus. So.
Well, I mean, that's why, I mean, I think we've mentioned before that you used to call me the Taylor Swift of rock and roll. Right? That's because I would only write like love songs, and that was dumb. And so when I wrote Fire, it wasn't about a girl. It was about sort of my relationship with Jesus, and just finding out how to build my own self as a person. And so it's funny that those two songs are right next to each other on the album, right?
Yeah. More of Me is a ballsy song, an ambitious one to try to put together. As I listened to it, as an amateur recording artist myself, I listened to it and said, like, how would I have executed this song? Because a lot of it is just one clean guitar and an organ. And so it's tough to get a full sound out of that kind of thing. And so it was an ambitious thing to take on, I think, to try to do it in that style, and it turned out great.
Yeah, thanks.
So I want to talk more about The Chosen One a little bit specifically.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Parker, my brother Parker, said that he loves that song, first of all, and then he showed it to one of his friends that he has, and he said every time they're hanging out and it's time to go home, his buddy will say, "Hey, is it Chosen One time?" And they'll listen to The Chosen One every time before he leaves to go home. So it's awesome. I mean, it has so many just meaningful allusions in it. I think they were all intentional. I like to think that they were. That it alludes back to some of John Williams' bangers in Star Wars.
Shh, don't say that. I'll get like copyright.
Oh yeah,
I'll get sued.
John Williams could be anybody. Common name. Yeah, that's true though. They're gonna find out. And then it alludes to Styx, I'm Okay at the end. It alludes back to Rammy Umptum. It alludes back to the album itself. And then it's just all about Star Wars. There's just so many good things about the song.
Yeah, I was nervous that I was trying to do too much, like musically in that song. But I think it turned out good. I like
Yeah.
it.
And it sounds like the Killers. There's just
Yeah.
everything I
Yeah.
love is just in that song.
I think I mentioned in our Imploding the Mirage review that I love it when albums like refer back to themselves. Like you start off with a riff and then towards the end you hear the riff again to like wrap things up. And so that's sort of, I guess, what I was trying to do. And the way I did it, I think, was pretty cool because I took these riffs in a minor key, and then I added them in a major key in this song. And so I thought,
Yeah, it's a musician's reference, right? If you don't have a trained ear, you're not going to pick up on it.
yeah.
So that's cool. Great. So speaking, we just touched on it a little bit, but what musical influences came through in this album to you, and was any of that intentional versus was it just you've been listening to that a lot, so it came out as you wrote?
Well, so the Killers and Styx, are obviously my two favorite bands, and so they're going to show up in everything that I do. But this album in particular, many of the songs that I wrote a few years ago, and I was at the time listening to a lot of Muse, and so you can definitely hear that in this album too. It's a lot more musy, a lot more sort of aggressive,
theatric, minor.
Yeah.
Fake News, maybe more than any other track is where I hear that.
I think Fake News and Hypocrisy are definitely the two biggest Muse tracks. But also the end of Akrasia sort of ends in a sort of a similar way to Knights of Sidonia.
Uh-huh.
But yeah. So Muse came through. Like I said, More of Me is sort of almost Greta Van Fleet. So
yeah, the way to hear influences in music is interesting because if you are not also a fan of the influencing band, you often just completely miss it. Like, for example, none of your songs necessarily sound like Styx songs, but if you're a big Styx fan and you listen to your album, you'll hear a lot of that stuff coming through. Yeah. So Styx comes through a lot. You mentioned Greta Van Fleet already in More of Me. The first time I listened to it, I said, like, that organ is Greta Van Fleet. Some of the lyrics is like sort of that same style. I got a little bit of November Rain vibe from Akrasia. Okay, I don't know if that was on purpose.
I mean, it's similar to this extent where it sort of starts slower and then shifts to like a more aggressive ending, right?
Yeah, and you've got the strings throughout the slow beginning part. Some strings going. And then there was one little bit of the Pretension solo that sounded like a John Mayer riff from Waiting on the World to Change. And I said, oh, that sounds like John Mayer, but I don't know if that's anything. It probably was just coincidence. Yeah.
I mean, at the end? Is that what you're talking about? At the end? Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, yeah. John Mayer is obviously one of my favorite guitarists, and so I listen to him a lot, and so it
comes through.
So it comes through, yeah.
I mean, but it's just cool to listen to the album and see, like, could you list 4 more different influences from each other? I guess you probably could, but Muse and John Mayer and Styx and Greta Van Fleet and the Killers, like, they're all very different styles, but they come together, and that's what's great about music is you can take the good bits of other artists, and then it just you internalize it and it comes out. Greta Van Fleet themselves is that way, that they've never said that Led Zeppelin is an influence when they sound exactly like Led Zeppelin.
Yeah,
that may be a marketing stunt, but
sure.
But anyways, great. Well, what else do you have to say about this album?
Briefly, you mentioned that the original version of Fake News had the news clips, right? The audio taken from different examples of fake news, right? So on like Spotify and Apple Music and all that, you don't hear those. But on YouTube and on SoundCloud, you can still hear the original. So if you're into that, you can look up Fake News.
I think it makes all the difference.
Already gone. I do think it's better. But which interestingly, the idea for me to do that was a late, like very late. Like I wasn't planning on doing that. It wasn't until a couple months before I released the album that I had the idea to do that. So originally I was planning on just the version that's on Spotify, just the instrumental and to hear all the toms and all of that. But I don't know. I'm glad I had the thought. It's cool, I think.
Oh, it's really cool. I get the rock and roll goosebumps every time at that solo. So
Nice.
great. Well, that's Hypocrisy and Akrasia. Go listen to it, listeners.
Yep. Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Amazon Music, everywhere you can listen to music. It's there.
And after you listen to it, internalize it. Go think to yourself, am I criticizing someone for being a hypocrite, or are they good intentioned?
Yeah.
And reflect upon yourself as well. When you fall short, is it because you're professing something you don't really believe, or is it because you lack moral weakness and you need some help in that area?
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't lack moral weakness. You would lack moral strength.
Yeah, sorry. If you lack moral weakness, then
Yeah, that's good.
Great. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah. It's been real fun, I guess. Cool.
Cool.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
Can't stop rock and roll.
Can't stop rock and roll.